What's the dumbest thing you've seen someone do that led them to not getting a job? I'm an engineer. My desk is in the front of the office, so I usually work as a receptionist if receptionist is on lunch. Doesn't bother me unless I'm on a conference call or something important. Dude comes in, says hey, stopping by, just passing out resumes. I was like, oh, I'm not a receptionist, but let me see how I can help. I called someone who also works as a backup and asked, hey, what's the process if someone just walks in? I sent him over to the front desk area and we handed him a generic application to fill out. It's so we can put his information on file. He looked at it and said, no, that's not my thing. I don't do that, and walked out. The funny thing is, I glanced at his resume. Dude was qualified for a position we are trying to fill that we don't have posted anywhere. Had he spent 5 minutes filling out the paper application, let us give it to HR, he probably would have gotten called in for an interview. My girlfriend's brother 23 was given an interview at our friend's work. She even did his resume for him to make it look good for the position he was applying for. Interviewer: how would your friends describe you? Brother: a chill, laid back stoner kid. I referred a friend to my company, and after he completed the online application he sent over his resume and CC'd the hiring manager. He applied using his Gmail account from college and still had his profile pic from Halloween. He was shirtless and wearing a wolf head mask while holding 2 bottles of Old English and had his snout in the air, apparently howling. Oh man, I've had a few doozies. Top 3 from one job posting. First candidate. Resume was solid. Phone screen went great. Invited him in for an interview. That went great. Finally starting to wrap things up and we asked him, is there any personality type that you don't like working with? And the dude answered, I don't like working with dicks. Fuck him. The CEO was in the room with us, lol. Second candidate didn't have any work experience, but he had a master's degree and had a distant relative that knew the CEO, so he was brought in for an interview for a director level role. His master's degree was in digital marketing, but he didn't know what an A/B test was. Third candidate. Solid resume. Solid phone screen. During the in-person, he asks us what the work hours were. We told him it was a pretty standard 9-5 MF with a bit of flexibility. Then he said, you mean I have to be here every day? Technically getting fired before his first day rather than not getting the job, but worked for a high-profile stockbroker connected to a popular British bank. We had to go through 6 weeks of training before they'd let us on the shop floor. They had a strict no phones at work policy due to our access to sensitive financial information. On the last day of training, as we were all going home, one dude whips out his phone, takes a picture of the shop floor and tweets, can't wait to lose people money. On the morning of what was supposed to be our first proper working day, he gets dragged into the manager's office and told he's fired because of his tweet. I have no idea how they found out, but we were all stunned. He seemed like a pretty good guy and he mentioned in training how desperate he'd been to get a good job because he was a single parent and could barely afford to raise his daughter. I attended a group interview whereby a group of 3 participants had to work together to solve questions given by the panel and in front of them. One participant decided that the best strategy moving forward was to try and belittle us by making our responses irrelevant throughout the process. That strategy clearly did not work, as the other participant and I caught on his stupid act and decided to make him sound really stupid in the end by surprising him with the task of providing the conclusion of our discussion. As he was too focused on his own strategy, he clearly wasn't participating in the discussion, hence, he became the biggest fool, stuttering throughout the conclusion. I got the job. I'm a technical director and I've been interviewing people for jobs for about 30 years. I ask a question which goes as follows. Suppose you had a disagreement with someone in the workplace about a work-related topic you felt very strongly about. How would you handle it? One guy who was very qualified for the job literally said, I'd shoot them, and just left that comment. I gave him a long pause to hear the rest of the comment. But he just sat there quietly. He didn't say he was joking or crack a smile. He just left the comment. Another time a woman gave a really good interview. At the end she asked if she could read something to the interview panel. Thinking it was some sort of thank you statement, I said yes. She then proceeded to read a very long and very bad poem about her life and all its difficulties. When she left the room, everyone literally facepalmed and said things like, "Oh my god." Another time, I'll spare the details, an applicant obviously lied multiple times during an interview and we called him out on it. He broke down and said, "I'm very intelligent but they won't pay me what I'm worth." He has applied for virtually every vacancy we've had, vastly different skill sets, and has submitted 4 completely different resumes. Just a month ago, an applicant who stated during the interview that he was 21 years old and had no formal experience, no college or tech school, was applying for an engineering tech position which assists with engine research. He claimed to have master level, in his own words, the highest level troubleshooting and repair ability, which he obtained from his current job of 6 months. The hilarious part was we had also interviewed his current boss for the same job and he truthfully explained that they don't do engine repair at their facility. They send all the engines out for repair. Then there was a woman who claimed to be a graduate of St. John's College and every sentence of her resume was filled with typos and misspelled words. I don't mind a misspelled word or two, but the errors were insane. In one case, she said she was a cashier and put quotation marks on the word cashier as if to imply she was really something else. The amusing part was that the very last sentence on the resume said she was proficient in Microsoft Word. Well, apparently she didn't know about the spell and grammar checker portion of Word. Emailed an applicant and offered to interview him. He called me on the phone. I didn't give him my number and don't know how he got it, then demanded to know the names of the people on the interview panel, their education level and what qualified them to interview him. Of course I refused but decided to still interview him, mostly because bad candidates help the young supervisors to learn what to avoid. During the interview he didn't answer any of our questions and instead rambled on about unrelated things. Then following each question he asked us a question and insisted on a detailed answer. Very bizarre. He has applied for almost every job opening we have. Another time I was looking for a new secretary, the previous one moved to Hawaii. I invited a candidate to interview and she replied that she wasn't available but could interview at another specific time and date. This is unusual and the date and time she picked conflicted with another scheduled interview. I seriously attempted to reschedule 5 times and she wasn't available, including a time after work hours. So I wrote and said it appeared we couldn't find a compatible date and that we would happy to interview her in the future. She emailed back a single word reply. Lol. Then there was a candidate we interviewed and we selected her for the position and set a start date. She explained that she couldn't start for 2 months. We contemplated the delayed start date and set a start date and salary. I spoke with her several times and she seemed excited. The start date arrives and she doesn't show up. So I call her and get no response. For the next 3 days HR and I attempt to contact her. We didn't know if she had been in a car crash or became ill or what had happened. She finally answered and was very rude and upset that we called her 5 times and said that she found another job making more money. She just didn't bother to tell us. There has been an increasing number of cases where interviewees look up questions on the internet during telephone interviews. Yes, we are aware you're doing it. Including the guy who was clearly being messaged over and over on his computer during the interview. We've had people fail to show up for interviews claiming they became ill but didn't bother to tell us until the interview panel waited for 20 minutes. Another thing we see a lot lately are plagiarized resumes. Where you'll be reading the resume and suddenly the writing style and word choice changes dramatically, or in some cases to bizarrely flowery language and back. We'll just for the fun of it copy and paste the questionable section of the resume into Google and boom, there it is, word for word in another resume on the internet. One of the best engineering resumes I ever read was a work of art. It was technically perfect and very well written. When we interviewed the candidate, he barely spoke English and had zero knowledge or understanding of the things he wrote on the resume. A quick Google search showed the resume was written by a woman and he simply changed the name and submitted it as his own. In another case, a foreign candidate showed in their college transcripts that they had transferred credits from a high school in Michigan to their engineering master's program. This was certainly a fake transcript, so during the interview I asked them to name every school they attended. All the schools were in Iran and none of the schools on the transcript were schools attended. We interviewed a current employee for a supervisory job. They were doing really well. Then someone asked a technical question and it somehow triggered them to the point they flipped out and started shouting, pointing their finger at the interview panel and calling them names. It was absolutely bizarre and so bad and unjustified that following the interview I told the panel to not discuss what happened and to reconvene the next day for discussion. None of us could figure out what happened. I spoke with their current supervisor who said that the candidate was having some sort of mental breakdown.